Hello, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well and had a good week. Yesterday was Lag BaOmer. Today, Friday, is the 34th day of the Omer. We're just 2 weeks away from Shavuos, so we look forward to a wonderful Shabbos coming tonight and tomorrow. We often hear in the context of Torah and within Divrei Torah that human beings do not change overnight. We cannot just jump and become a new person, but we must grow and develop gradually. We must be realistic what change is possible within ourselves. And similarly, we often hear that there were certain aspects of society that the Torah really wished to change. The Torah wished the Jewish people to be different, but yet Hashem cannot demand that the Jewish people should totally change, be totally different to the entire environment and ideas of the time. And so whether it is the concept of slavery or other issues, the Torah had to create a sort of a long-term plan and cannot demand the impossible from the Jewish people when they accepted the Torah. However, in the beginning of this week's Parshas Behar, the Torah does seem to ask, well, must have seemed at that time at least, to be the impossible, and that is the mitzvah of Shemitah. The Torah says that once every 7 years, for an entire year, the entire country, the entire nation, an agricultural society shuts down and nothing can be planted. The ground cannot be worked. We no longer live in an agricultural society, but it would be as if today to say for an entire year, no one works, there is no income, not for anyone, the entire nation will live off of savings. And then when, again, it was an agricultural society, when you cannot ship in food from far away, we're talking about not just extra money for luxuries, we're talking about food to survive, the threat of famine. And the Torah asks every Jewish person to do this, to shut down the nation, to not work the land in search of what seems to be a utopia, that for a year, everyone, all citizens of Israel are equal. There's no distinction between rich or poor, not even between animal and human. It's a dream. It's a dream. And indeed, the Torah itself recognizes how incredible this must have seemed to the Jews when they heard this mitzvah from Moshe Rabbeinu. The Torah itself says, V'chi tomru mano chabashana hashvit. And when you will ask, what will we eat? Hein lo nizra v'lo nasof etvuotenu. We will not be able to plant. We will not be able to sow. We will not be able to gather in a harvest. V'tziviti et birchati lachem b'shana shishit. Hashem says, I'll take care of you. There will be a bumper crop. Almost a miracle, Hashem promises. And indeed, probably originally, Shemitah was simply too hard. It was unimaginable to tell an entire society, entire people, not to plant for an entire year. Until the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash, it's very likely that Shemitah was basically not observed. Divrei Hayamim within Tanakh itself says that the first exile of 70 years was because there were 70 cycles that the Jewish people did not observe Shemitah. However, when the Jews came back, when they rebuilt the second Beis Hamikdash, the second Commonwealth, after that 70-year exile, it does seem that the Jews began to observe Shemitah. Ezra, in a public ceremony, has the Jewish people commit to observe the laws of Shemitah at the very beginning of the second Beis Hamikdash. We know from outside sources like the book of Maccabees, which describes that during the war of the Hashmonaim with the Syrian Greeks, that there was one year in particular that was very difficult because there was a scarcity of food because it was Shemitah and people were not planting. And then all the way up to the Mishnah, just after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash into the Gemara, it is clear that many people, if not the majority of people, are observing the laws of Shemitah. And so it was impossible at first, but then the Jewish people did it. Similarly, in the 19th century, when the Jewish people initially came back to repopulate in larger numbers the land of Israel, it must have seemed impossible to keep Shemitah. The Jews at the time were so poor, there were famines even without observing the laws of Shemitah. And yet, 100, 150 years later, of course, it is still difficult without getting into any technicalities, but now it's no longer seen as impossible. More and more Jewish farmers actually let the land, leave it fallow. Do not work the land. Observe Shemitah. Some with some halachic loopholes and others without any halachic loopholes. Simply the way the Torah envisions it as it is presented in the Torah. It's no longer impossible. It was impossible 150 years ago. It is no longer impossible. And so one of the many lessons of Shemitah, which appears in the beginning of this week's Parsha, and of course this year is the Shemitah year, all those living in Israel, all those farmers that we just referenced living in the land of Israel are observing Shemitah today. One of the lessons of Shemitah is to dream big, to even dream the impossible, that the Torah asked us to do something which at the time was unimaginable. But the Torah implicitly was saying, you can do it. Hashem was saying, I believe in you. And so to all of us, of course, we need to be realistic. We need to grow in measured steps, but also sometimes there is a place to dream big, to dream the impossible, to imagine some great learning project. I know some people still recently joined Daf Yomi. You're going to finish the entire Daf Yomi. Or to imagine some great advancement in our observance of mitzvos, of really changing a certain part of our character, which we've been working on for so many years, which seems impossible to change. Some great chesed idea, community idea, how to build, how to strengthen the community. Shemitah says, imagine something incredible, imagine something impossible, because it is not. Just like the Jewish people, it might have taken them centuries to observe Shemitah, but they did it. It no longer was impossible, but they would have never done it if there was never a mitzvah from the beginning. And so too, for all of us, let's all try to think a little bit bigger. We can do more. We can do much more. And our dreams can come true. That is one of the lessons of Shemitah. We can do so much more. The world can be changed, but we should not limit ourselves. We should not think that it is impossible. It is possible. And that is one of the most important lessons of Shemitah, that nothing, if we are committed to it, if we believe in Hashem, if we work hard, if we trust ourselves, there is no spiritual accomplishment that is beyond this. Good Shabbos, everyone, and Shabbat Shalom.